Hi, and welcome to the SmartMAI Consulting Edge Podcast, where we speak with leading business advisors, consultants, and leaders on how to help organizations overcome challenges, navigate change, drive growth, and create measurable results. I'm your host, Dan Mulberry. It's common for companies to experience a gap between strategy and execution, which results in a lack of sustainable performance. Today's guest is going to help us explore how companies can manage through those types of issues. Shannon Carver is the founder and president of Lean Leaders Plus, a firm that's built a successful framework for their clients that combines Lean Six Sigma continuous improvement with leadership development, strategic planning, and team development. Shannon holds an MBA in marketing from the Carlson School of Management at the University of Minnesota, and he holds a Six Sigma Master Black Belt. He's also an author and has recently been a guest on Close Up Radio. Shannon, welcome. We are honored to have you here today.
Thanks. Honored to be here.
Well, you started as a design engineer early in your career and then became a Six Sigma Master Black Belt, which is a huge accomplishment, by the way. What made you move from the technical engineering side into leadership and coaching?
Yes, good question. The short answer is I was asked. So, I've always heard this and I followed this advice, and that was in the early part of your career, say yes more often than no. And that's how you grow. And in the latter half of your career, the way you grow is by saying no more often than yes. So that was pretty early on in my career. I was only an engineer for about 3 years, and I got that opportunity to become a black belt first. Did that for a couple of years and then got the opportunity to be the Master Black Belt for North America. And it was a great opportunity.
That's awesome. Well, you've said that developing others is your core purpose in life. Was there a specific moment or moments or a mentor that kind of crystallized that approach for you?
Yeah, I'm one of the lucky ones. So I grew up in an organization called Sauer Danfoss, and in the 11 years that I was in that company, I had probably 4 or maybe even 5 really, really, really good mentors. And I didn't deserve it, but they poured into me, they challenged me, they helped me grow. And for me, just the recipient of that, I feel like I have to give back. When I went into so if you take that experience and combine it with when I went into consulting, I went in as more on the lean side. And I would go work with a lot of companies, and what I would see is a lack of that, a lack of development, a lack of support, a lack of coaching, a lack of just strong leadership. And so that's where I was like, I really got convicted about this is an area I could really help in, and it's really needed.
Absolutely, it's needed. I see that over and over with my clients, as well as hearing that from the consultants that I have on the podcast. So let's talk about Lean Leaders Plus. So you positioned yourself as different because of the way you can combine lean continuous improvement with the leadership development. Most consultants that approach those areas are siloed. Give me a real example of where the presenting problem looked like a process problem, but was actually a leadership problem.
Yeah, well, I mean, as a lean sensei and expert myself, our eyes look for process problems all the time. And so I was working with a client actually just not too long ago. Let's see, we probably 2.5 months ago now. We had launched a new program called Team Leadership Development, or Team Leadership Program, TLP. It's the follow-up to our really popular PLP, People Leadership Program. And the focus in this program is to work with making your team work better together. Well, typically, if you were to tell me that a team needs to increase their output by 25%, I would say the first thing I would go do is I'd go look at the processes and look for waste. But that wasn't the intent of this program. This program was to develop leaders to develop their teams and to engage their teams better and put in systems in place around the teamwork to help the team function more as a team with the goal of increasing the results or the performance. And I'll be honest, I was blown away when 8 weeks later, so in our first pilot, that was our first pilot program, and it was 8 weeks long. We've since said that everybody said it was way too short. We're doing 12 weeks going forward. But in 8 weeks, that one of the leaders that was in there worked on developing his team, making metrics more visible. So just having a dashboard so that the team could see what the performance was, and increasing the ownership. Like one of the things we do is have them install, if you will, or develop peer accountability, not just leader to subordinate accountability, but peer-to-peer accountability. And those two things were the main things. There was a few other things, but really it was the way he was leading that team resulted in a 25% output in production
Wow.
in that 8-week period of time, and there was no process changes. And so that was kind of this, wow, it's really, really impactful where leadership shows up in performance.
That's amazing. So I know you take a collaborative approach. I noted that one of your clients has said that he thought he was a really good leader, but when you came in, he found out that he hadn't built a team. How did you triage that and diagnose that? And what steps did you take to correct that situation or improve it?
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're talking about Mark, if I remember correctly. And I would say in fairness, Mark did a fair amount of self-diagnosis. What I think we did, so me and my team, what we did is we exposed what good team leadership looks like. And as we did that, he came more and more to the realization of what he was not doing. And so I think a lot of the concepts that we take, and this is a senior leader. I mean, a senior leader in one of our clients, and so he's a good leader. So at the same time as we expose more and more what it takes to be a strong team leader, not just a people leader, but a team leader, a leader of a team, he just became more and more aware of the things that he had not been doing, even though he'd been in leadership for over 20 years.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, tell us a little about your model. I know it's a continuous improvement model where you're redoing the cycle over and over. You've got it up on the wall behind you. Talk to us about how you develop that and how you implement that.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. Again, my background coming up through Lean and Six Sigma, continuous improvement, everything in that world is built on what's called the Shewhart cycle, plan, do, check, act. And Edward Deming made that popular, 100 years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so everything in the continuous improvement world kind of revolves around that idea of plan, do, check, act, plan, do, check, act as a circle and as a never-ending cycle of improvement. And the more and more I did leadership with continuous improvement, because I'd have a lot of clients back in my early days of consulting where we'd go improve processes and they'd say, okay, what's next? And the answer always came back to culture. And the way you change the culture, the way you improve culture is through developing leaders, because leaders define the culture by what they say and do. And what I have found over the years of working with and developing leaders is that it's the same cycle. It's the same cycle of improving leaders. So you can apply the same continuous improvement cycle to personal development, leadership development, and so it's the same language, right? Current state, where are you at today? Where's your strengths? Where's your opportunities? Where do you want to be? What's the gap between the two? And let's go to work on improving those. The difference is in leadership, most of those gaps are behavioral and habitual. And they come back to our thinking and our beliefs. And so we're working on changing habits and beliefs as we develop leaders, because most of what leaders need to do is change behavior, which is more adaptive than it is technical. So
makes sense.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think the team development that you provide too is also very interesting. Do you want to delve into that a little more about how you kind of create more cohesive and aligned teams as opposed to individual leaders to lead those teams?
Yeah, for sure. So I think the best way, mental kind of model to look at is if you think about like what a relationship map is. And so I always draw the picture with, kind of 6 people sitting around the table. And again, teams have more or less people, but if you kind of visually see that and start drawing the lines between the individuals, right? A team makeup is made up of you've heard the statement of you're only as strong as your weakest link.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody's been on some team where there's been 2 people on the team that don't get along, and it has a significant impact on the rest of the team. And so, where I think in the consulting world, there's a lot of people like Patrick Lencioni that will talk about the 5 dysfunctions of a team and, all the team function things of how do you make a team function going through, forming, storming, norming, performing. And we use all of that stuff. In addition to that, we also work on the individual relationships, one of our proprietary terms is, and the thing I wrote the book on is what's called trust, credibility, and respect, TCR. And so we look at what the TCR is across all of the relationships within a team. And then we make specific, current state assessment. What do we want it to be? And then what are the gaps? And let's go work on that. And when you take both concepts, like how a team functions well and the components of the relationships, and you work on both of those simultaneous, you can have some really significant impact on how a team functions well.
Oh, I'm sure. That's a really interesting approach too. I don't see a lot of people approaching team development in that manner. There's obviously a focus on alignment and leadership, but less on really actively creating that cohesive team that'll work together and provide sustainable results. Let's circle back to another real world example. One of your big wins was how you doubled output at a plant in Mexico within 18 months while building a new leadership team. What was the actual sequence in that engagement? Did the leadership work come first? The process work? Were they simultaneous? How did you approach that?
It's a little bit of both. So it was kind of a fun and scary experience from this perspective. So on the first time I went down there, and I spent a week a month for those 18 months in Mexico at that plant. On the first trip down, I went down with the vice president of operations. And on the way down, he said, "Hey, just to let you know, we have a financial problem, and we have to let go one of two people. There's two top leaders, and we have to choose which one to let go. And I want you and I to talk about that. And by the end of this trip, you and I are going to agree on which one's going to go." And so that was week one. Okay.
Nice.
And so we made the choice, and I think it was the right choice, although there's a funny story with it. I don't know if I'll have time to go into it, but either way, so we started with that top leader as the first step. Then we worked on a bunch of process stuff, and along the way, then I would say in parallel, back and forth, we made promotion. There were promotions made, and there were people that were moved into different roles, and so there was a fair amount of work going on and simultaneously around the leadership development. So we were putting them through some training and development and some team development, and then doing the lean work and improving the processes, kind of all simultaneously throughout that year and a half. In fact, it was such a success story that unfortunately that company sold the company, which was a Dallas held company. They ended up selling that plant, and every one of those leadership people that were on that team reached out to us and said, "Hey, you got to help me find a job at another lean company because the new owners of this don't believe in lean, and they're tearing it all down," which was horrifying for us. And their production went like this, it just came right back down. So,
I'm sure.
It's a really awesome story, and it's also a very sad story once you put that much time and energy into something and see such great results.
Well, we're of course going to pivot this conversation in a minute to AI and the impact it's having both on your practice and on your clients. But before that, I want to touch on another thing you've got over your shoulder there. On your chart, you've got the accountability matrix. Talk to us about how you develop true accountability with your clients' personnel, what the steps are to get them to take on that accountability and to track and measure that they are being accountable for their responsibilities.
Yeah, wow, that's such a big topic. I'll try to give you a couple things. How's that? So first of all, I think you need to recognize there's three different types of accountability, right? There's personal accountability, and obviously as a leader, we want our people to have a lot of high personal accountability.
Sure.
Because the best way a team works is when people show up and say, "Hey, I didn't get that done. I want you to know I didn't get it done, and I will do it by this date." And they take personal accountability, and that's the best answer. And so we try to develop our leaders to help instill personal accountability and talk about that. These are the expectations, these are the ground rules, all those kinds of things. There's also peer-to-peer accountability, and then lastly is the leader to subordinate accountability. And so from a team development standpoint, again, like this program I just talked about in this team leadership program, TLP, we really work on the leaders instilling peer-to-peer accountability, because it's actually quite a bit stronger accountability when a peer holds someone accountable rather than the leader holding them accountable. And then, of course, we work
Interesting.
on, yeah, it absolutely is. It's so true. But of course, you can't go through a leadership development program and not work on how to have those conversations, because the number one problem with leaders holding people accountable is the lack of courage to have the tough conversation in the first
Right.
place. And so we do a lot of again, from an adaptive standpoint, it's more about overcoming fear and having courage and building the habits of early and often feedback and having those tough conversations. And so we do a fair amount of role playing around that. We also then, through our adaptive process, over all of our programs have these adaptive processes, whether it's 8 or 12, or even a year-long tail, where they're going and having very specific activities and experiments that they've got to go do, where we force them to do those things and then come back and reflect on how did that go. And so it's all these micro learnings that happen in the real world that actually are the most effective things towards actually getting sustainable behavior change.
Oh, fascinating. So this should be an easy question.
Yeah.
Do you see that leaders who are not willing to adopt that accountability for themselves, do they have trouble getting accountability from the rest of their team?
Yeah, again, if I go back to the core principle of TCR, right? As a leader, you're given some level of authority, but you have to earn the right to actually influence people through building trust, credibility, and respect. And that is a huge killer of TCR. If I don't hold myself accountable, if I'm not willing to do the thing I'm asking you to do, those kinds of leaders don't get a lot of respect. They lose all credibility, and people don't trust them. So that generally is a recipe for disaster, as I'm sure you know.
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, it should be an easy question for you.
No,
I knew
those
the answer
questions,
to that one before I asked.
I will say that most of the time, I'll pick a number. It's 95+% of the time when we're developing leaders, they're making significant changes. But there's a few that they discover through our programs that leadership really isn't where they want or need to be. And so we also have those conversations with our clients, partnering with our clients, and we'll help them transition to some other role in the organization or out of the organization, but most of it's to some other role if that's not a good fit.
Gotcha. That's interesting. I would believe that you don't expect to see that too often, but it's got to occur. Sometimes
Yeah,
people
that's right.
think they want to do something, they get into it, and it turns out not to be the greatest fit for them, and they don't always realize it until you have that conversation with them.
Yep.
So, let's shift to AI, if you don't mind.
Let's go.
How are you personally using AI or automation and how you run Lean Leaders Plus?
Yeah, I use it every day, all day, it feels like. I mean, I use it a lot. In fact, I've started building, I've actually got a project in ChatGPT called Lean Leaders Plus Roles, and I'm creating bots that are doing very specific jobs at this point. And so one I created last week was the proposal bot. And so, man, I got to tell you, I hated creating proposals because I'm not a good writer.
Mhm.
And so what I have found is, AI can help write those proposals because there's a lot of similarities to it. And so, I created this bot that basically will ask you the questions, you fill in the answers, and voila, it spits. I did my first one using that AI bot this week, actually. I finished it up anyway this week. I started last week. So that's one thing. We got roles. So I've got that. I've started to use it to monitor my emails and help me there. That's kind of interesting. That's kind of a newer one. I just learned of this new tool called OpenClaw that literally is free and will 100% connect to your inbox. And I'm excited about some of the things it can do. I use it in developing content all the time. The thing about chat, and again, there's a lot of people that, it's Claude, it's the way to go, and Gemini and Copilot and Chat and Perplexity and all these different things. I would say, and I use actually the three major ones, I would say mostly, but Chat is the one I use probably the most because it knows so much about me,
Mhm.
and so it has a lot of context about the business, I should say, and so I will use that one a lot to create, again, content. I will use it to check to do data analysis. So if I do a 360 with a leader, I'll pull all the data in. I'll use chat to run some summary and find connections, and it does a really nice job of that. I also will use it to analyze just data, right? I mean, you're getting data
It's
from a
great.
company, and it does really good at analyzing data. Um, I use it I use it. I've got some specific bots that help me with creating marketing content. Creating what are the things that are going to land the most? Like what are the best hooks and what are the best, what's the best content, and a lot of idea generation on that side. Um, Man, the question might be more of what do I not use it for at this point, is what it feels like.
That's
Because it
great.
feels like, I mean, of course, everybody, right? I use it to write emails. I mean, everybody, that was like AI 101, using it to help you write better emails.
Exactly.
Um, but yeah, using it for a lot of different things.
Well, you brought up an interesting point with the multiple tools out there. And what I've seen both with myself and with my clients is that everyone starts with their first tool. That tool gets to understand them and know them and collect data on them. And people can sometimes be hesitant to switch to another tool or to utilize both. But I find that if you bounce Claude and ChatGPT off of each other, you end up with better overall results. So it takes some investment of time for both platforms to understand you, but you can also share information between them. You can do a dump from ChatGPT of everything you've done with it and put it into Claude and vice versa. So there are ways to leverage that and take advantage of what both platforms are good at.
The
So
other thing that's interesting that we've done along those same lines, and I've done a little bit of that, not as much as I probably should have. But the other thing I've done is when I'm collaborating with somebody else, one of my other consultants or my marketing partner, they've got their own thing with their own context, and so sometimes we'll take my stuff, I'll put it in theirs or theirs in mine, and like we were doing some software, we were trying to decide what we were going to use for our CRM. And so me and another consultant, oh, hey, give me give me your feed. I'll put it in mine, and they were bouncing off each other. And I think I agree with you. There's a lot of power when you get it's almost like multiple perspectives
right.
from these different AI tools, and super powerful because you see things that you wouldn't have seen if you just stay in your own stream, if you will.
What have you tried with AI that didn't work as you expected? Have you run into any
Hmm.
pitfalls trying a new approach or a new tool?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I would call them still limitations. Like there's still some limitations on it. Like I would love to be able to, I would love it for it to get better at building presentations. I thought, we can create some presentations, and I think by moving beyond just the chatting into coding,
Mhm.
I've seen some more success there. But even there's still a ways to go around, actually providing a clean, value added. So I think it does really good at creating the content, but creating the actual aesthetics and stuff. Again, and I haven't spent as much time there. I did just launch our new website using AI. I didn't do it. I actually paid for a guy to help me do it, but I was very insistent on I want that to be done in AI because I went out and within 30 minutes was able to create a website that was better than the one I already had. And
Right.
I'm like, if I can do that, then getting a professional that can really kind of think of and understand it better, they ought to be able to go way farther. And then I can update it easier than using, the old WordPress sites that, I could never figure out how this goes. And so yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing where I've struggled is around, quality of and timing, quality and timing of getting like real quality presentation content.
Right.
Yeah. The other thing I would
So
say is pictures. Like it seemed to be that Gemini was better at pictures, and now it seems like that's the thing. I think they're changing so fast.
they change
It seems like
rapidly.
you got to keep testing your assumptions as to which one's better at what things. And so sometimes I've noticed I've gotten into a rut. Like I always go to Gemini for pictures. Well, that assumption is gone now. So just being very adaptable, I think, is a challenge. But
Yeah, the change is rapid and the pace of that change is accelerating, so it's hard to keep up with. Well, let me ask you this. You mentioned data and analytics previously. When you're out at a plant floor at a client, obviously you need to collect a lot of data about what they're doing, how their processes are working. How much of that are you utilizing AI to collect and analyze versus manual processes? Does it depend on the client, or do you have some capabilities in that area?
Yeah, that's a good question. I will tell you that my highest viewed post on LinkedIn was from a client's floor. And actually, in fairness, he did the work. He did this. I didn't do it. He did it. I asked to share it. He took a picture of an area on a plant floor. He then said, propose 5S, update the picture to propose some 5S improvements. And so he showed it to me, and I was like, wow, that's really good. Again, is it great? And did we just bypass the engagement of people? Of course we did, but I was impressed with the quality of the idea generation. And so I asked him for permission. And so I went and I put that here's the current state and here's what the proposed state for my AI is. And people just had a they had a hairy canary talking about that. They really wanted to engage around that from all different perspectives. And I thought that was really good. That's a little bit sidestepping your question, and for two reasons. One, in what I do now, where I'm developing leaders that grow, that go and do this stuff more than I go and do this stuff. And I would say that's the big switch between, the previous consulting firm I was with and Lean Leaders Plus. When I created Lean Leaders Plus, I really wanted to work with leaders to develop their mindset for them to go do, rather than for me to go do for the client. And so I honestly don't go to the floor very often looking at process and looking at data in the way that we're structured today. But I think there is a ton of opportunity, like the example I just gave you, where, using it for idea generation and problem identification, I think is super. There's a ton of power there.
Yeah, I agree. And that was an interesting example that you gave. What are you saying are you seeing any trend with your other clients or kind of across the board with your clients about how they're adopting AI in a plant or in operations? Or are they behind the curve on that?
Yeah, I still see a lot of fear, to be honest with you. I see a lot of fear and resistance to using it to some degree. I mean, people I think are all on board with using it for email, but taking it to the next level, I mean, I'm sure you see this all the time too. There's a lot of companies that are putting in strict policies, and it seems like some are trying to contain it more than maybe more than what which might be stifling some of the innovation or utilization of it. Um, and I get the whys behind all that. I'm not challenging the whys behind all that, but I do still see some challenges with that. And then, but I see some at the same time. I would say, I mean, there's a lot of excitement and energy over what it can do,
Mhm.
and I think we're just still at such an infancy stage as to what the capabilities are. One other thing I'll tell you that we're doing on the leadership development side is we are requiring AI to record coaching and accountability conversations. And then we're using that for feedback on how that conversation went, which is another, I think, really powerful way to utilize it from that perspective.
I agree. And you've kind of answered this already, but where do you see the biggest gap between what AI could be doing for continuous improvement and what's actually happening today?
Yeah. Well, I'm actually going to switch back maybe to the other question just a little bit, but I'll try to answer that.
Sure.
I think one of the things I think people have to get aligned around is what the value and what the purpose of the tool is. So one of the things that I'm seeing people are fearful, I brought up the fear before. I think they're fearful that we're trying to take away people. So, obviously in the continuous improvement world, it's all about respect for people and engaging the minds and the hearts of the people doing the actual jobs and improving their processes. And I think the problem in the CI world is that some people see AI as taking over that for people, and in which case I would be against it too. I just don't
Sure.
think that's the answer. I think when people see that this is just another tool, and in continuous improvement, there's tons and tons of tools, right? There's hundreds of tools. And so when people can see that AI is just another tool that can help brainstorm, that can help identify problems, can help, as you go through the process of continuous improvement and you actually just say, okay, if I look at my process of continuous improvement, where can AI help me? Meaning help the person going through the process, then I think it has dramatic opportunities to help us in the problem identification, in the root cause analysis, and in the brainstorming of potential solutions. I think those are the three biggest areas that AI can help us. And but I think we have some maturing to do around what the fear is there.
Yeah, and we could obviously have a whole separate discussion on that fear and how to manage that. I'm a big believer, just like you said, that AI is a tool. And for the vast majority of roles out there, it's going to make that role more efficient, more effective, and frankly, more fun for the person performing the role. There
Yeah.
are roles that will ultimately be replaced. The more, in today's environment, the more routine and mundane the tasks are, the easier it is to be replaced. But that doesn't mean that those people don't have skill sets and knowledge that can help contribute to the company in another way. So it's a balancing act.
I agree.
So we're running out of time here. Let me ask you one last question. What's working well in the business right now, and what's the most frustrating for you week to week in running Lean Leaders Plus? You described a lot of stuff that's working very well.
Yeah, there's some. I mean, the AI stuff is really helping us, to be honest, get farther faster. And I'd say right along with that, I've engaged a gentleman that used to own a $25 million marketing agency, and he's kind of through some life circumstances, he doesn't have that anymore, but he's getting back to doing some of that work. And so he and I are partnering up on the marketing stuff, and I'm learning a ton and I'm having a lot of fun with it. And we're trying to, shove AI in everywhere we can go to try to make the engine of prospecting better. And so there's a lot of fun and excitement around that right now. I don't know if there's anything frustrating as much as challenging. So I think one of the things I shared with you is literally July 4th, we moved to Raleigh, North Carolina from Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas. And so, I was just at a networking event last night, and the answer is I have zero in my network right now. Okay. And so I'm starting over from ground zero. And so it's more daunting. I don't know that frustrating is the right word, because I'm actually kind of excited about it. Like historically, I'd say I'm not a great networker, and I go to networking events and I'm like, here we go. But honestly, I've got a new perspective on it, and I'm actually having a lot of fun with it. But it is daunting because the amount of, starting over, it feels just like an overwhelming task. And there's a bit of a burden, I would say, with that, with having a team of people that, I'm responsible for feeding that group of people. And so, I'd say it's more of that weight and dauntiness than it is frustration. So, yeah.
Makes sense. Well, this has been a fascinating discussion, and I think you're a shining example of how AI can be leveraged to make everything better while avoiding some of the pitfalls of it. So I really appreciate you joining us today, and the insights that you shared. It's been very interesting. If people want to reach out to you, learn more about you or Lean Leaders Plus, how do they get hold of you?
Yeah, 817-948-4060. Shannon S. Carver at leanleadersplus.com or www.leanleadersplus.com. Or you can check me out on any of the socials, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, any of those.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, again, thank you very much. And everyone, thank you for watching. This has been the SmartMAI, the Consulting Edge Podcast.